Hello, everyone. This is Jeff Brailio, and I just wanted to quickly thank you for purchasing the seller financing package of forms. This is the recorded video of how to go through the forms and fill them out. Hopefully you got yours in front of you or some pen and paper to take some notes, and we'll go through this. But first things first, remember that the forms you have purchased are copyrighted by my office. You've purchased them, and you can do anything you want with them. That's great. You can edit them and revise them and delete stuff and use them over and over and over again because you've paid for that right. But don't provide them to anybody else. That's kind of the deal. These are your forms to do whatever you want with, but not to sell or copy or use for other people. Okay. Okay, here's our form. Package contents. The first document in there is actually a really, really big document. That's what we're going to spend most of the time on. And can be used for all types of seller financing situations. I've summarized the three types here. There are videos on my website from webinars that I've done in the past on seller financing. And so a good understanding of the three main types of seller financing deals really, really helps you understand how to fill out the documents, because if you understand what the deal is, the document makes a lot of sense. If you don't understand the deal and how it works, then the document might be a little confusing. A true seller financing deal is when the seller owns the property outright, which means there's no underlying mortgage. And the seller just becomes the bank and they finance your purchase. So they give you a loan to buy their house, and you make payments to the seller rather than to a mortgage bank. All-inclusive deals. This is when the seller is selling you the house and there is an underlying mortgage, but the amount that is owed to the seller is greater than that mortgage. So there's equity in the house left to the seller, and the seller is financing an amount greater than the underlying mortgage. So in other words, let's say the house is being sold for $100,000 and there's a $75,000 mortgage on it. That extra $25,000 belongs to the seller, but the seller is financing that, and so it's called an all-inclusive, and it's usually secured with an all-inclusive note and deed, which is called an AITD, because that secures the seller's equity that they're also financing, and that AITD is sort of wrapped around that underlying mortgage. And then a subject to deal. A subject to deal is when there is an underlying mortgage, but what the seller is receiving is really nothing. You are taking over that property subject to the underlying mortgage, which means you're just taking over their payments. For some reason, maybe there's no equity, or what little equity there is, you're just cashing out the seller at closing when you buy it. And so the only thing remaining to the seller is really this underlying mortgage, and you're just going to take over payments, right? You're not getting a new mortgage for an amount greater. The seller isn't owed anything, and you're just going to step into their shoes and start making their mortgage payments for them so that they can walk away from the house. Okay. Then the rest of the documents are about options and lease options and stuff like that. A little more straightforward, and we'll go over those documents as well. Okay. Also remember these forms are essentially form documents, and you're using them to kind of create the transactional documents. They're really good and they cover just about everything, but they may not cover everything. And there may be times when you do need to call me or a lawyer to kind of get some help, just kind of for a particular transaction. But we have created these to be used just about everywhere, and they're very, very good. Okay. Here's a seller financing agreement. This is the big document for the three different types of seller financing situations. Remember this part up here. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. I hope you can. But this is kind of the introduction to every contract. It's in the date, the name of the purchaser, the name of the seller, that's the buyer, and then the address of the property. Okay, and here you've got the purchase price, and you know what that means. And these are kind of the three kind of types of seller financing deals. The purchase price shall be X amount, and it's not subject to any existing mortgages. Okay, so that's kind of a true seller financing situation. This is the purchase price shall be blank and is subject to the below listed mortgages. So this is probably an AITD or WRAP. And then this one, the purchase price shall be the current balance on the existing mortgage. This is a true subject to, which means what you are taking the property for is exactly the remaining balance on that underlying mortgage, whatever it happens to be. And it's using an exact number because remember, they've been making payments on the mortgage. It might be like $74,328.65. Okay. But you're buying it at whatever the current balance is on the below mortgages. Okay. So that kind of helps you, and you can delete, if you just need that first one, you can go ahead and delete, the next two. That's fine because you're doing this as a true seller financing or as a wrap or as a true subject to. But that'll help you kind of lock down the type of deal you're doing. Okay, here you're going to list the existing mortgages. You can get this information off a property report that your title company produces for you. Because anytime you do a closing, they're going to pull title and they're going to run a property report or title report, and they'll send that to you. And you can get this information directly off that report. You can also get a lot of information, not all of it, but you can get some of the information about this note off the most current mortgage statement that your seller should have. And you're going to need that too. You're probably going to need the property report from your title company, and you're certainly going to need the most recent mortgage statement from your seller. Okay, so those are documents you're going to need. So here we got two listed. If there's just one mortgage, then all you need is the first one. You can just go boop and delete that because there's no second mortgage. But if there's a second mortgage, you can put it in there too. Okay. And the note, if you kind of read through this, it really is pretty straightforward. The note being dated, this will be the date on the note. That's the date that the borrower or your seller signed the mortgage. Here's the named borrower. It's going to be your seller's name. Here's the original principal amount. You can get that off the PR. The current note holder, remember banks sell mortgages. They may have originally got the bank through Bank of America and then Bank of America sold it to Chase. Okay, but you can get that off the PR. This is the date the trust deed or mortgage was recorded on the property. It's going to be very similar. It's probably going to be within a couple of, either the same day or within a couple of days of the note date being signed. Because if you ever bought a house, you know that you go into closing, you sign the note and deed, and then the next day or the next couple of days, the title company records it on the property. So sometimes those dates are a little bit different. This is entry number. Every county records things differently. Some use an entry number, some use a book and page, and some use entry number as well as a book and page. So you kind of got to learn the art of how these things are recorded. And you can get this, honestly, it comes right off the PR. So again, get that PR from your title company because it's going to give you all this information and you don't even have to just copy and paste. It's that easy. But this is where the mortgage was recorded. Okay, so we're going to just assume one mortgage and we're going to take all this and we're just going to delete it. Okay. The purchase price, this is most of the, these paragraphs are just clarification of what's going on. So there's really nothing you need to do with them. You should just leave them as is. And it says, this is just clarifying that the lien amounts on the mortgages listed above are incorporated into the purchase price, and that's true for any of the seller financing situations. And that these might not be exact numbers because again, the current balance on a mortgage changes every single day because every single day interest is added onto that mortgage. So these are kind of approximate numbers, and we're clarifying that when you buy this house, and let's say you buy it subject to that underlying mortgage, that balance is, variable. This is a subject to, okay, this is in the event that there is an underlying mortgage. Now you could, if there is no underlying mortgage, this is a true seller financing situation, you could delete these. Because this says the buyer agrees and understands that it's being purchased subject to an existing mortgage. If there's no existing mortgage, you can delete it, but leaving it in is totally fine. Okay, you can leave it in. You don't need to change it. But if you really understand the contract, and you want to shorten it a little bit, you can delete this and the due on sale because, of course, if there's no underlying mortgage, there's no due on sale. So, but again, my suggestion is probably just leave it because it's just information. Okay. Power of attorney, in the set of forms, you will see a power of attorney. This is something that you should get as the buyer, and you get the power of attorney from the seller that allows you to talk to anyone associated with that mortgage on the seller's behalf. Now, hopefully, you don't need to use it, but it's good to have in case you do. And as well as bank information. And these forms actually come in the package, so they're a little bit later on the package. Okay, earnest money, you know what earnest money is. Okay, so this is just, if you deposited earnest money with the seller, that's great. Down payment, this is if you're making some kind of down payment to be paid at closing. If it's a true subject to, obviously, you're not, you're just taking it over. But maybe again, you're buying the house for $100,000 and there's a $97,000 balance on the mortgage. And so instead of doing a wrap, and financing that last couple of $1,000s to the seller, you're just going to pay that seller the $2,000 or $3,000 in cash at closing, and then take it subject to the underlying mortgage and just take over payment. So you can put that in there. Any down payment, you know what that is. Seller financing terms, again, this will depend on the kind of deal you're doing. And if you understand the deal, you know what this means. If it's a straight subject to, there is no seller financing terms because the seller is not financing any part of the purchase price. You're just taking over the mortgage. But in a true seller financing situation or wrap, then you need to secure that somehow with either a note and deed, and you'll use a note and deed in a true seller financing situation. Why? Because there's no underlying mortgage. So it's just a regular old standard note, promissory note, and trust deed. If there is an underlying mortgage that you're taking it subject to, that's a wrap, then you're using an all-inclusive. So it's one or the other, and it's really not that hard. So anytime there's an underlying mortgage, you use an AITD, that's this one. And if there's no underlying mortgage, you use that one, okay? And this is the amount that's going to be on the new note. Now remember, if you are using this AITD right here, because there is an underlying mortgage, remember the new note is going to be the pretty much the full purchase price. So let's use our example of a $100,000 purchase price and a $75,000 underlying mortgage. Now the seller's only getting 25 grand. That's the equity in the house. But remember that all-inclusive note and deed will be for $100,000. That's the purchase price. And how that works is you're essentially paying the seller $100,000, but that is wrapped around the seller's mortgage of $75,000. So the seller's still obligated to pay the $75,000 to the bank. So the net to the seller is still the 25 grand. It's just that note is the full amount of $100,000, and it's wrapped around the $75,000 mortgage. Okay, so that's how that works, or not secured. Now, with a true subject to, very often sellers will want a little more security, a little bit. This is part of the negotiation with your sellers. Typically, there's no all-inclusive note and deed on a true subject to because the seller isn't owed anything additional, and so we don't even bother with it. But if your sellers are a little bit nervous, or they want some extra protection, a little more security, you can do an AITD that mirrors that underlying mortgage. And you can record that so that there is a AITD to the seller that's wrapped around the underlying mortgage. And even though there's no value there because the seller isn't getting anything, as far as equity, but it does give the seller rights to foreclose on you if you don't pay the seller or if you don't pay this underlying mortgage. And so that's an extra benefit to a seller. Most buyers, real estate investors, don't want to do that. But again, if your seller wants some extra protection, they can secure, in a true subject to situation, the same amount of that underlying mortgage with an AITD, which gives them some more power over you in the event that you're in default, because then they can foreclose and take the property back, before their credit is ruined or something like that. So again, that's an option with a true subject to, and that's something you can negotiate with sellers whether they want it or not. Okay, here's the note deed and terms. Okay, this is actually a really important section because either you need to create your note and deeds or have your title company create note and deeds or a lawyer create note and deeds. In order to create those note and deeds, they need information. They need to know what to put in the document. And so this is where you put in the information to be able to create the note and deeds at a later stage. Okay, so here's some tips. This right here, the note and deed shall mirror the terms of the underlying note. This isn't a true subject to, and for whatever reason, your seller wants to secure it with an AITD. Okay. Well, this is telling whoever's creating that document that they will just get the exact same information off the underlying mortgage. It'll be the same interest rate, same term, same monthly payment. Everything's identical. Okay. So you can just check that box and then get a copy of the terms of the note, which you can get off the mortgage statement or the note itself. And it's best if you can go to the actual note and get a copy of it from your seller. But if not, you can get a lot of it from the mortgage statement. And then they will create a new note and deed with the exact same terms. Okay. Or, right, then this is for a true seller financing situation or with an AITD where the note is more than the underlying mortgage. Okay. You need to come up with a principal amount. That's the amount of the note. And it's going to be the seller financed amount. So in our example of a $100,000 purchase price and a $75,000 underlying mortgage, the principal amount will be $100,000, okay? Because it's going to wrap around the underlying mortgage. If it's a true seller financing, let's say that you're buying the house for $100,000 and there is no mortgage. Then again, what is the principal amount? It's $100,000 because that's the purchase price of the house. So again, and if you put $2,000 down on a $100,000 house, how much is your principal amount? $98,000. So again, it works just like any other mortgage. Then you got to have an interest rate. Okay, that's the percentage interest that you're charging for the loan. Term, that's how many months or years. Okay, amortized term or interest only. Okay, you need to decide. You need to understand amortization schedules. I mean, because again, you're creating a mortgage here. You can amortize something over 30 years, which is a standard mortgage, 30-year mortgage. And your term may only be 5 years. That's called a balloon, right? In other words, this is a 30-year mortgage that's amortized out over 30 years. So it really is going to take you 30 years to pay it off. But if the term is 5 years, that obligates you to pay this off in 5 years. Okay, so you can do either or. There are some issues with Dodd-Frank. You need to kind of watch my Dodd-Frank video to understand, in situations like this in seller financing. Normally it's not going to be a problem, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But if you have questions, certainly consult with something about, an attorney or my videos on Dodd-Frank. Or you can just do an interest only, right? And that's fine too. And then you're just paying interest, no balance, no principal balance. And so that's an option. And here's your monthly payment, which you should figure out. It should be based on the interest rate, the principal amount, and the amortized term or interest only. Okay. So again, it does take some information and learning about mortgages. It's not hard, and there's plenty of ways to kind of learn about it. If you do this, make sure that that's correct, and maybe you want to get some help from a more seasoned investor. This is probably the hardest part of a seller finance. It's just coming up with this. But once you understand how to create a mortgage, it's not hard. And there are mortgage calculators online. And so if you know how much the principal is, you know what your interest rate is, you know what your amortized term is, or if it's interest only, you can go to those mortgage calculators and it will tell you the payment right off the bat. Okay, so again, mortgage calculators, look them up online. And again, this needs to, it needs to be right because you don't want to, have problems down the road. Okay, balloon payment. Okay, this is just a reiteration that if the term is, 5 years, in the event this note is not paid in full by the end of the term, the 5 years, the purchaser shall pay the remainder of their principal balance and any all accrued interest and fees by the end of the term. Again, this is just reiterating that this is not a 30-year mortgage, but a 5-year balloon, and it needs to be paid off in full in 5 years. And other terms that you might have, who knows? Could be where you want the payment made, what to do in the event that they want to make an additional payment during the month or something like that. Okay. This one is about whether or not there's going to be a lender's policy of insurance. If you do either a note and deed, like in a true seller financing situation, or you do an all-inclusive note and deed in a wrap, or in a subject to, when you close the house, your title company is going to ask whether or not the seller, who is the bank in this situation, wants a lender's policy of insurance paid at the title company. This is a part of the closing cost. All banks require this, period. If you ever go get a real mortgage, a bank's going to require this. If you get a hard money loan, the hard money lender is going to require it too. But here, the seller is the bank, and the seller is the hard money lender. And so this is something you negotiate whether or not they want that lender's policy of insurance. If it's a true seller financing and there's no underlying mortgage and the seller is just financing your purchase of the house, get your seller the lender's policy. Seriously, it's if even if they're not savvy enough to know and understand it, get it anyways. It's just a protection for them, and it's not a big cost. So definitely recommend it. If you got a wrap, it's kind of optional. You can talk to your title company and ask them the ins and outs of whether or not it's necessary. And again, your seller may require it, or your seller may be fine without it. But that's part of the negotiation you do with your seller, whether or not you insure their note and deed. Okay, subject to monthly payments. This is only necessary in a true subject to, so there's no note and deed and no all-inclusive note and deed. This is where you're stepping in and just taking over payments, right? So in the event there is no note and deed, purchaser shall make a monthly payment of blank. What are you going to put in there? The exact monthly payment on their mortgage statement. That comes right off their mortgage statement. Just ask for a copy of their most recent mortgage statement, and you're going to find out what their monthly payment is, okay? To cover all monthly payments on the existing mortgage according to the terms of that note, okay? And you can write this in and clarify, because your title company will probably want clarification of this information, because most likely or in the event you're making payments to like an escrow specialist, and that comes a little bit later in the contract, rather than directly to the seller, escrow specialist is going to need to know where this money goes. So, and you want to know too, this is to protect you. So on that first existing mortgage, here's the payment on that first mortgage, and this is only if there's a second mortgage, so you can delete that if there's no second mortgage. And here we just wrote in that includes escrow, taxes, and insurance, because most do, okay? But if they don't, you need to make sure that this payment, if it doesn't include taxes and insurance, guess what? You have to add that in later, right? Because if their mortgage, for whatever reason, they don't escrow their taxes and insurance, somebody still has to pay the taxes and insurance, right? So you need to figure out what that is, add that monthly fee cost into your monthly payment that's going to go to escrow specialist. And then escrow specialist needs to know they're going to make a payment of X amount to the bank, X amount to an insurance company, and X amount to the county for taxes at tax time. So that is maybe the first difficult part is this note and deed up where we go. Sort of this note and deed amount. That's probably one tough spot, and this is probably the second tough spot. Is just figuring out what is included in these payments, and you've got to know that. I mean, we get as a title officer, I get all the time people doing seller financing deals. And they say, "Oh yeah, my payment's gonna be $900 a month." I'm like, "Well, does that include taxes and insurance?" They're like, "I don't know." Well, don't you think it's important to know? Because if your mortgage payment doesn't include taxes and insurance, and you do the subject to, and you just pay the mortgage payment, taxes are going to be put into arrears, and it might lead to a tax sale. And the insurance may lapse, and you have no insurance on the house, and if it burns down, you're screwed because there's no insurance. So you need to understand the deal. Okay, it's not your title company's job to figure all of this out. This is you. You need to figure out what these payments include. Right? You need to understand if there's an HOA. Okay, I've had clients come with a seller financing deal and say, "Oh yeah, my payment's gonna be $900 a month." And we're like, "Oh, this is a condo association. Who's paying the HOA dues?" And the client's like, "Oh, I didn't know there were HOA dues." Okay. Make sure you understand the deal. Make sure you get true idea of what all your costs are going to be. Okay. Other monthly fee, that's probably going to be zero, but you never know. I've had deals where the buyer made an extra payment to the seller. They took it subject to, but they just in the deal that they negotiated that they were going to make a $50 a month payment to the seller. Okay, it wasn't principal, it wasn't part of the wrap or anything like that. It had nothing to do with the purchase price. It was just sort of like something they negotiated. And they just negotiated a $50 extra fee every month that was to go to the seller. Okay, because again, if you go to escrow specialists, they're going to need to know how much they're receiving, how much what's your monthly payment to escrow specialists, and where every single dime goes. I mean, or penny even. You need to make it sure to the penny They know X amount to the bank, X amount to insurance company, X amount to seller, X amount to county tax, whatever it is. Okay, so you just need to understand all the financial numbers that are involved in that monthly payment. Okay. Term, the purchaser shall make all monthly payments for a term of blank years. Okay. And again, this is just a reiteration of the term that's up here. Okay. Payment subject to change. If you take this is just inserted in the event you're doing this subject to, and they've got either a variable rate loan, or because of taxes and insurance, they change every year. So this is just an acknowledgement by you as the buyer that your monthly payment may change, just like the seller's payment to their mortgage company may change. Okay, so you are agreeing to make that you will change your payment in the event the underlying mortgage payment changes. Okay. Payment due date. Okay, again, this is just no different than any other mortgage, or think of this as rent, right? You're making a monthly payment. We've written in that it's due by the first of the month. This is the month that it's first beginning. It still says 2015. We should probably make that a blank, but you can know to change that. This is just the date, the first monthly payment that you're going to make. Okay, it's probably the first day of the month after you close. Oops. Boy, that flew fast. And then we just wrote in, if payment is not received by the 5th of the month, then there's a late fee, right? But again, these documents are editable. You can change that. Okay. If payment is not received by the 15th of the month, then you are in breach of the terms and the seller can foreclose on you if there's a note in deed. Okay. But again, you can change whatever terms you've negotiated with your seller. Payments. This is where you're going to make payments. Are you making payments directly to the seller? I do not recommend that ever. Okay. That's a bad investor decision. Are you going to make payments directly to their bank? Which is fine for you. The seller may not like that because the seller wants to guarantee that you actually make those payments, right? They don't want to trust you to make payments to their bank on their mortgage and then you nod and they don't know anything about it, okay? Or are you making that payment to like an escrow specialist, okay, which is a great alternative to protect everybody. So, but again, that's something you negotiate. Either you're going to make payments directly to the seller, directly to the bank, or to an intermediary escrow company. Okay. This is closing costs. Again, this is like any other normal REPC, right? Who's paying the closing costs? You can just write that in there. Very often, investors agree that they will pay all the closing costs. The sellers usually have no cash. They're in dire straits. They need to just get out of the house. So they don't have any money to actually pay closing costs. But again, it's what you negotiate, but it's who's paying the closing costs. Okay, this line is seller also agrees to pay the following items in cash to close it. That's just an option in case you've said, hey, I will catch you up on your HOA dues. I will give you $500 to help move out, whatever, okay? And right here it says all taxes, assessments, adjustments, and closing costs shall be paid by the purchaser at closing. Be aware of that because again, this is in the event, in most likely event that the seller has no money or cash to pay anything. But taxes and assessments and adjustments and closing costs, including title insurance, you don't have to pay for all that. You can make your seller pay their half, which is kind of standard. The buyer has closing costs, the seller has closing costs, and each pays their own cost. That's kind of in a standard retail transaction. And if you have the Utah REPC, that's pretty much how it goes. But again, this is an investment deal, and it's up to you and how you negotiate with your seller of who's paying these costs. But you do need to kind of clarify that because this will tell your title company what to do and who to charge. Okay, it makes your title company's job much easier when they know what they're doing. Okay, this is additional cash. It's optional. You may just probably delete this, but this is just in case there's some other, because I've had deals where there's some other cash to cover some other thing. So there's plenty of options for you to customize this deal to make it work. Okay, title of the property. This is no different than the Utah REPC. And so it's just saying that the seller will provide good title to you, right? Always, always, always do a closing through a title company, have the title company generate a title report, and then have them close so that you know you're getting good title. Do not just do this on your own without knowing that information. Okay, Default, again, this is if you don't make payments within 15 days of the due date, you're in default, and the seller has the rights of either foreclosure or coming after you. But you can change that to whatever you want. Most of the rest of this are just warranties. This is the seller warrants that the mortgage that they've told you about is the only encumbrance on the property. So that's their only mortgage. Okay, but again, don't trust your seller. Don't trust your seller. Get a property report. That property report will tell you all the mortgages on the property. Okay, because you're selling, go, oh yeah, I just have one mortgage. I make a payment to the bank, and it's just the one mortgage. Okay, they may actually have a second mortgage, right? Maybe the same bank, and the two payments are rolled into one, or they may have a second mortgage like a HELOC and not even know about it. And maybe they haven't borrowed against it, so there's no payment, but it's still there. It's still sitting open on that account. And with HELOCs, you have to be careful because if it's a $50,000 HELOC, maybe they've only borrowed $5,000 of it, but they can borrow $45,000 and add $45,000 of debt onto the property. So HELOCs you really want closed out or frozen if you can, and you can do that. Work with your title company and their bank. And at the time of this, they can freeze that so that they can't borrow against it anymore. So be aware that those can be kind of tricky if the seller has like a revolving line of credit, like a HELOC on that property. Okay. Again, just more disclosures from the seller. This says that the seller won't do anything that's going to affect your standing in the property. So again, it's just protections to you. This is saying that after closing, the seller has no more rights to the property. This is a true sale, right? They are selling you the property. They're only staying on as a lender or as a holder of the mortgage. Okay. Possession of property. Again, this is pretty much standard Utah REPC stuff. This, you get the property the day after recording, but you can change that. And if the seller doesn't get out, you can charge them, a daily damage. Okay. This is basically that there are no real estate investors involved. I keep it highlighted because if you are a real estate agent, you want to delete this, or you want to keep this yellow part in, and delete this part. Okay, so this first part says that there are no agents. The second part says yes, the buyer is a real estate investor, and is disclosing your agency. So you want to keep one of the two. Okay, again, just more general stuff, pretty straightforward, and then signatures. Okay, so again, this really does look like a Utah REPC. A lot of those terms are the same thing as Utah REPC, except we have combined the Utah REPC and made better the Utah Seller Financing Addendum. Okay, you're probably familiar with both of those. Those are two separate documents that are available from the state of Utah. The Seller Financing Addendum is really bad, though. I don't like it. And so this one, all of this stuff, like right here, the monthly payments and right here, not that one, the monthly payments and this right here, the terms of the new note and deed, that's right off. It's the same information that you'd fill in on the seller financing addendum on the Utah form. We just customized this and made it, put it into one document and made it flexible that you can use it in all different terms, because that seller financing addendum works in some situations, it does not work in other situations, and it's not super clear. And I have more problems with clients filling that out than this out. Okay, but again, this is what this is. This is a REPC and seller financing addendum combined into one. So it might look a little daunting, but remember that really it's just those two documents in one that's customizable. Okay. Okay. This is seller's acknowledgement and statement of understanding regarding the purchase contract above. So this is really the disclosures you want to get the seller to sign. Okay. It just talks about that they have not been coerced. There's been no undue influence. That they understand that if there's an underlying mortgage, they're keeping that mortgage in place, right? That they're going to stay on that mortgage. That it's not going away, even though they don't own the house anymore. That there is a due on sale clause. That due on sale clause might be called in. So it's just all these disclosures you really want to get the seller to acknowledge. That protects you as the buyer investor. Okay. this agreement may be assigned. Okay, this allows you to assign that contract, and that gets their permission to do that. So again, this is all sort of disclosures you're providing to the seller, and you're getting them to agree to. It's all about protecting you. Okay. So just get them to sign it, and we've never had anyone really not want to sign this. Can I get rid of those? Here is a special power of attorney. Okay, this is our POA. You can get your seller to sign this at closing. Okay, this says that and this is, you put the name of the seller in here. Okay, you put the seller's address in there. Have made, constitute, and appointed, and appoint. This is you. Okay, so the seller is going to appoint you as their attorney in fact. Okay, and this is your address. So seller's name, seller's address, your name, your address. Okay, if there are two people on a mortgage, like a husband and wife, do this form for both husband and wife. Okay, so you'll need two of these. Okay, and then down here, okay, in the county of, that's where you put the county. We'll assume it's in the state of Utah. Known by, this is the street address. This is the tax ID. And right in here, you fill in the legal description. Where do you get that information? You should know the answer to this. Off the PR. Okay, that's where you get a PR from your title company. You just copy and paste the tax ID and the legal description right off the PR. Okay. And then when they sign it at closing under notary, this gives you the right to talk to the bank. It's just a legal, and anything dealing with this property, you have the same rights as the seller. Okay. Lender's letter, this just gives you permission to talk to the lender. You can use this or the POA. Either one works. But almost all lenders, the borrower can talk to the mortgage lender, but nobody else. The mortgage bank won't talk to you unless you're the borrower. And many banks have a form, and this is kind of copies of the form that they have that gives you permission to talk to the bank on your seller's behalf. But remember, you don't want to talk to the bank if at all possible, because if you provide this to the bank, they're going to ask why. Why is somebody else talking to us about this mortgage, right? It might be a red flag. But if you have to, you now have the permission to do so. So that's something you definitely want to get signed in advance. This is a letter to an insurance agent. Most seller finance, investors make the seller keep their current insurance in place with the bank, and then they get a second insurance policy covering them. So they got double insurance, and the reason they do that is if you change the insurance with them and then naming you as an insured, that new insurance company is going to notify the mortgage bank and say, hey, here's the new insurance policy. And here's the new insured. And the bank's going to go, wait, why is there a new insured person on this insurance policy? Did the title change hands? Boom, it's a red flag. So most clients will keep the original insurance in place. And yes, they'll make the payments on it. And they will get a second policy. So that's an additional insurance. And it's a little bit more cost. But they'll get a second policy naming themselves as the insured so that they're insured. But one way or the other, you want to be covered by insurance. Okay, so my suggestion is keep the original in place, the seller's insurance in place, that's escrowed into your monthly payment. Keep making payments on, and just get a second policy naming you as an insured. Okay. Okay, lease options. That's pretty much it with the seller financing. Your first two, it might be, you might take you a while to fill that out the first couple of times, but after you do it, it's really quite easy. Okay. Lease options. Most of you are familiar with lease options. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these. Just remember, if you are the seller on the seller side of a lease option, you want to use two separate agreements. You want to use an option agreement and you want to use a lease agreement. So you want to put somebody in as a tenant under a lease, and then in a second document, you give them the option to buy it. Okay. And if you need to know why, just go to my website, look at my webinars on seller financing deals and lease options. We talk about why that's true in a lease option. Okay. But again, this is an option as an addendum to the lease agreement. So this is a separate document. This is you're on the seller side or the landlord side. Okay. Do two separate agreements, and it's just an option agreement. You pretty much know how to fill out an option agreement. So I guess probably no real reason to go through a lot of this because it's just, purchase price, the term when they have to exercise their option, option money. Again, this is very clear that this option money is non-refundable. Okay. And yeah, you kind of fill it out like that. Get everybody to sign it. This document is a lease and option. So this is the document you're going to use if you're on the buyer side or the tenant side. And here we've put both the lease and the option into one agreement. And again, there are reasons to do this. It's an hour-long webinar on lease options and seller financing where we talk about why. But again, so this one is for if you're on the buyer side, and this one is if you're on the seller side. And of course, you're also going to need just a standard lease agreement, right? So and there's lease agreements in here. They look like any other lease agreement. Okay. So this one, because it's both in one, it's going to have the option terms, the information that you'd find in an option, and it's going to have lease terms. So here is your lease amount and and possible lease increase and termination and stuff like that. So again, this looks like any other lease agreement or rental agreement, and you can go through this and modify it if you need to, but it's pretty much, that first part is pretty much a lease, and here is the option, okay? So again, this is the option terms that look just like the option agreement above. It's pretty much the same thing. Okay, it just happens to be in one document rather than two, okay? Affidavit of option. If you are on the buyer side, you may, and you're doing a lease option from the seller, remember, that doesn't go through a title company or a closing because it's not a sale of property. It's just a lease. But you as the buyer may want to record your rights to the property so that you can notify future people looking at this that you do have the rights of an option on this property. So what this is an affidavit of option. You can fill this out. It does need legal description, tax ID, common ad, the street address. Okay, you do need to sign it under notary. Okay, so it does need a notary stamp. But then you can record this with the county, and then anyone searching title will see that you have an option on this, and that's just a way of protecting your rights as a buyer. Okay, so you don't have to record the entire option agreement, which has lots of terms, lots of personal information, etc., that you may not want to record on the county records. So you can record this. Okay, this is a protection to you as a buyer of a lease, or the option or of an option. Okay. Assignment, right? If you have a lease option, maybe you've got, you go into a lease option, you're renting it out, and you've got an option to buy in 3 years, and now you want to assign that to somebody else, to another investor. Okay. You can assign the option to somebody else. This is a master lease agreement. Okay. It's just a lease agreement. And the difference between this and a regular lease agreement is this one allows subleasing. That's what a master lease agreement does. It allows subleasing. So if you are the buyer or the tenant in a lease option, you want to sign this one with the seller, right? Because what this does is you are renting it from the seller and you have the right to sublease it to somebody else. It's called a sandwich. Okay, this is the sandwich lease. And allows you to say you lease it from the seller for $900 a month, and then you turn around and you sublease it to somebody else for $1,000 a month, and you collect $100 a month in the middle. Okay, and so this one is just a lease agreement, but allows the tenant to sublease it out. You can use this one when you want to do a sandwich or be the tenant, but do not use this one for your tenants, right? Because you don't want your tenants having the right to sublease. Okay, so this one is for you when you're the tenant. Okay, and then the next one, tenant lease agreement. Okay, this is the one that you will then use with your tenants, because this one is not subleasable. This one does not allow tenants to sublease it. They're stuck in it, right? Because your tenants are your tenants, and they can't assign this to anybody else. Okay, and it's just a lease agreement, right? So lease agreement, and security deposits, first month's rents, blah blah blah. It's just a lease agreement. Okay, we'll go through here. Oh, look at that. That's it. Okay, so that is the seller financing. Again, we're going to wait back kind of up to the top here. Just kind of remember these. That big seller financing document really becomes easy when you yourself understand exactly what kind of deal you are doing. Okay, so understand what a true seller financing deal is, what an all-inclusive deal is, and what a subject to deal is. Because if that's really clear in your mind, then filling out that document becomes much, much easier. Okay? Because you know, oh, I don't need any note and deed because this is a subject to. Or you're like, hey, this is an all-inclusive, so I'm going to need an AITD. Okay? And it just helps you kind of figure out. And I do have videos, from previous webinars on seller financing where I talk about all of these in a good long hour video. So please check those out. Okay. And again, there you go. There's the instructions on the seller financing document. Good luck and happy house hunting.